The afternoon sun, a sickly red disk, struggled to pierce the thick haze of smoke that blanketed the small town of Crestwood, nestled in the Californian foothills. The wind, once a pleasant breeze, now blew hot and heavy with the smell of scorched pine and desperation. Sarah, 32, adjusted a tarp over the bed of her old Ford pickup, the fabric flapping and snapping in the wind. Her hands were grimy with soot, a stray strand of brown hair clinging to her damp forehead. She glanced at the simple house where her daughter Lily, 7, was with her grandmother, and the knot of fear in her stomach tightened. "Mom, can we go now?" Lily's voice was small and scared, coming from the front door. "Grandma says the sky is getting angrier." Sarah turned to her daughter. "We're almost ready, sweetie. Just got to secure this one last thing." She tried to sound calm, but her voice betrayed the tension. "The sky isn't angry, honey. It's just tired." Lily's grandmother, Martha, a woman with tired eyes and white hair, appeared beside Lily. "Sarah, the evacuation order is mandatory. We can't stay here any longer. The fire's on the ridge. I can hear it." Sarah looked at the top of the hill, where the smoke mingled with a menacing orange glow. "I know, Mom. Just let me make sure we have everything. I don't want to leave anything behind this time." As Sarah struggled with the tarp, a fire engine siren blared dangerously close. The sound was followed by a distant boom. She looked up at the sky, at the chaos of ash and embers falling like dirty snow. Suddenly, a police car's siren lit up the street. An officer shouted through a megaphone, "All residents, evacuate now! The highway is being closed in 1 hour." Sarah's heart raced. She ran into the house, grabbed Lily and her grandmother, and hurried them to the pickup. "Let's go," she said, her voice filled with urgency. "We're leaving now." The traffic on the main road was a nightmare. Cars crawled, stopped, and the air was thick with the sound of horns and the anxious murmur of people. Sarah, her hands tight on the steering wheel, kept her eyes fixed on the road, while Lily, in the back seat, held her grandmother's hand tightly. The landscape around them was a frightening orange-red, and sparks flew over the burning trees. That's when she saw it. On the shoulder, near an overturned car, was a baby bag on the ground. The bag was open, and from inside, Sarah heard a faint but insistent cry. She looked in the rearview mirror, seeing the panic in her grandmother's eyes. "Sarah, don't stop," her grandmother said, her voice trembling. "We can't stop here. It's too dangerous." But Sarah had already hit the brakes. The baby's cry was a sound she couldn't ignore. "I have to," she said, her voice choked. "There's a baby there." She got out of the car, feeling the heat of the fire on her back. She ran to the bag, pulled out a baby about a year old, wrapped in a white blanket, crying. His small red eyes filled with smoke. He was hot to the touch, and Sarah knew she couldn't leave him. She held him close, her own fear momentarily forgotten, replaced by a fierce, protective instinct. She ran back to the car, her chest heaving. "I found a baby, Mom," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We can't leave him." Her grandmother's face was a mix of shock and terror. "Sarah, whose is it?" "I don't know," Sarah said, buckling the baby into Lily's car seat, Lily now in her grandmother's lap. "But he's coming with us. We'll figure it out later." As they drove on, the flames seemed to be chasing them. The sky grew darker, and the smoke so thick it felt like an oppressive blanket. Sarah held the baby, whose cries had softened into whimpers, against her chest. Lily, now quiet and wide-eyed, stared at the baby, her small hand reaching out to gently touch his cheek. The world outside was in chaos, but inside the car, a new, fragile kind of family had just been formed. Sarah, a woman who had lost everything once before, now held another life in her arms, a life she was determined to save. The makeshift shelter at the high school gym was a microcosm of Crestwood's tragedy. People huddled on cots, their faces streaked with soot and worry. The air was thick with the smell of antiseptic, sweat, and unspoken fear. Sarah sat on a cot, the baby sleeping soundly in her arms, his small face peaceful and innocent amidst the turmoil. Lily was asleep next to her, her hand clutching Sarah's shirt. Martha was talking to a Red Cross volunteer, her voice low and worried. "We have to report him, Sarah," Martha said, returning to the cot. "The police need to know." Sarah nodded, her gaze fixed on the baby. "I know, Mom. I will. But I just want to hold him for a little while longer. He feels so fragile." A police officer, a kind-faced woman named Officer Davis, approached them. "We're trying to identify all the missing people," she said gently. "I heard you found a baby." Sarah recounted the story, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. Officer Davis listened patiently, her expression growing somber. "We found a vehicle on that stretch of road," she said. "It matches the description of the car belonging to John and Eleanor Vance. They were reported missing a few hours ago." The name Vance sent a jolt of ice through Sarah's veins. It was a name from her past, a wound she thought had healed. She looked at the sleeping baby, his small features so familiar, so much like. "What's their relation to you, Sarah?" Officer Davis asked, noticing the change in her expression. Sarah's heart pounded. "Eleanor Vance. She was my best friend in high school. We had a falling out, a bad one." The officer's face softened. "I'm sorry to hear that. We're still searching the area for them. It's a miracle you found the baby, though. You're a hero, Sarah." But Sarah didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a fraud. She knew why she and Eleanor had a falling out. It was because of John Vance, the man Eleanor eventually married. John, a charming and charismatic man who had once broken Sarah's heart, leaving her devastated and pregnant with Lily. Sarah had never told him, had never told anyone. She had moved away, rebuilt her life, and raised Lily on her own. Now, the past was crashing into her present, carried on the winds of a wildfire. Over the next few days, the search for the Vances intensified, but there was no good news. The fire had burned through that area, leaving nothing but ash and rubble. The Vances were presumed dead. Sarah's grief was complicated, tangled up with guilt and regret. She thought of the young, bright-eyed girl she once was, laughing with Eleanor, and the angry, heartbroken young woman who had left town without a word. Now she was holding their son, a tiny boy named Leo, in her arms. The news of Sarah's heroism spread, and donations poured in. A local news station wanted to interview her, and she reluctantly agreed. She sat in front of the camera, holding Leo, and spoke about the importance of community and hope. "I just did what any mother would do," she said, her voice filled with a quiet strength. "He's safe now, and that's all that matters." Later that night, as the shelter quieted down, Sarah looked at Leo's sleeping face. He was so much like John, but he had Eleanor's eyes. It was a cruel twist of fate, a reminder of a past she had tried so hard to bury. But as she held him, she didn't feel anger or resentment. She felt a profound sense of love and responsibility. This baby, this echo of her past, needed her. He was alone in the world, and she was the only one who could give him a home. Weeks turned into a month. The fires were finally contained, but the devastation was widespread. Crestwood was a ghost town, a landscape of charred trees and scorched earth. The community, however, was not broken. It was rising from the ashes, stronger and more united than ever. Sarah, Lily, and Martha were staying with a kind family who had a spare room, their own home now a pile of rubble. Sarah had become the de facto mother to Leo. Social services had placed him in her temporary care, recognizing the bond they had formed. The legal process was long and complicated, but Sarah was determined. She had started a crowdfunding campaign to help other victims of the fire, and the response was overwhelming. People who had lost everything were finding new strength in each other, and Sarah had become a symbol of that resilience. One afternoon, as Sarah was helping to sort through donations, Officer Davis approached her. Her face was grim. "Sarah, we have an update on the Vances." Sarah's heart sank. She braced herself for the worst. "We found them," Officer Davis said, her voice barely a whisper. "They weren't in the car. They were found at the hospital in a nearby town. They were in a serious accident and both were in a coma. They were just released. They've been searching for their baby." Sarah's world tilted on its axis. John and Eleanor were alive. The parents of the baby she had been protecting, loving, and raising were alive. The joy of the news was immediately overshadowed by a crushing sense of loss. She had to give Leo back. The meeting was arranged for the next day at the police station. Sarah walked in, holding Leo's hand, her heart a lead weight in her chest. Lily, holding her mother's other hand, was quiet and observant. They walked into a room where John and Eleanor were waiting. John looked different. He was thinner, his face etched with pain and exhaustion. Eleanor, still pale from her hospital stay, had a haunted look in her eyes. Sarah's past self, the angry young woman, wanted to lash out, to demand to know why they had abandoned their son. But the present Sarah, the woman who had held Leo through the worst of the fire, felt only a profound sense of relief and a quiet ache. Eleanor saw Leo, and a sob escaped her lips. She ran to him, kneeling on the floor, her arms wrapped around him. "Leo, my baby, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. John looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with a gratitude so deep it was almost overwhelming. "Sarah, there are no words," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved our son. You saved our family." Sarah nodded, a lump in her throat. She looked at Lily, who was watching the scene with a solemn expression. She knew this was the end of their time with Leo. But then Eleanor looked at Sarah, her tear-filled eyes meeting hers. "Sarah," she said, her voice shaking, we heard what you did. We heard how you protected him, how you cared for him. We'll never be able to repay you, but we'd like to ask you something." John nodded, his face a mixture of hope and fear. "We know we can't be perfect parents overnight. We've been through a lot. And Leo has grown to love you and Lily so much. We were wondering if you and Lily would be willing to stay with us, at our home, while we all heal together. We want you to be a part of his life, a part of our family." Sarah's eyes welled up with tears. She looked at John, at the man who had once broken her heart, and saw not the past, but the present. She saw a man who had been through a tragedy, a man who was grateful, humble, and ready to heal. She looked at Eleanor, her old friend, and saw not the anger of their past, but a shared love for a small boy. She looked at Lily, who was now holding Leo's hand, and saw the bond they had formed. "We would like that very much," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We would like that a lot." The room was filled with a mix of tears and laughter, a testament to the power of forgiveness, community, and the unbreakable bond of family. The wildfire had taken so much from them, but it had also given them something unexpected, a chance to heal, to forgive, and to create a new blended family, bound together not by blood, but by a shared history of loss and a shared future of hope. The embers had left an echo, a promise of a new dawn rising from the ashes.